Teach me about the Great Lakes. Teach me about the Great Lakes. Welcome back to Teach Me About the Great Lakes, a twice monthly podcast in which I, a Great Lakes novice, ask people who are smarter and harder working than I am to teach me all about the Great Lakes. My name is Stuart Carlton, and I work with Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, and I know a lot about driving 2.5 hours for what ended up being a 20-minute tour, but I don't know a lot about the Great Lakes. I'm joined today by Carolyn Foley, our awesome, our amazing, our super duper research coordinator. Carolyn, what's up?
Not much. Hoping my audio holds together today.
I'm hoping everything holds together. It's not just your audio. It's late in the year. It's that end of semester time. So you get the end of the year, like the normal end of the year. You get the end of the semester. There's a lot of in-laws, and we're all just trying to keep it together.
But you also get...
That's right. We were thinking of the same segue, which is what happens like 50 episodes in. You also get the most wonderful time of the year, and that is Fishmas. That's right. Every December throughout the Great Lakes and throughout really the entire fish world, we all turn our thoughts inward and celebrate the most wonderful time, which is Fishmas. And I cannot even believe this is happening. I mean, I can't believe it, but I'm very excited anyway. And that is we have soon-to-be Dr. Miss Fishmas herself. Katie O'Reilly is joining us today, and so we're excited about that. And we're also going to be joined by Mr. Dr. Fish, Titus Alheimer, and we're gonna do something really cool. We're going to draft Great Lakes fish. It's going to be super fun. But before we go to whatever you're going to do, we're going to clarify that Titus is Dr. Fish HG on Twitter, a social media magnate in his own right. So that's why he's Mr. I was going to ask him to clarify that. But yeah, we're going to talk about that. He's number 10 with the completely legit and not at all sketchy rankings of Great Lakes influencers on social media that have me on there twice, even though my Twitter feed is nothing but dad jokes and complaining about my kids. But we're going to get to that. But before we get to that, actually, you know what? It's not exactly appropriate, but it's been a bit, and they both do research. So we're going to go with this. Researcher feature. A feature in which a researcher gonna teach us about the Great Lakes. Got to bring out the big dogs for the special guests. All right, we're joined today by Katie O'Reilly. Katie is a doctoral candidate at Notre Dame in the Department of Biological Sciences, and we are so pumped to have her on. How's it going today, Katie?
It is going great, Stuart. I am so excited to be here in the height of Fishmas season talking to you guys about Great Lakes fish.
Oh, we are so excited to have you. We're also joined by Dr. Titus Alheimer. He is the fisheries specialist with our colleagues at Wisconsin Sea Grant, also home of the Introduced podcast. Titus, how's it going?
Doing great. I'm surrounded by fish. Living life to its fullest. Living
life to its fullest. I agree with that. Anyway, two of my heroes are on the podcast today, so I'm super fired up. So, Katie, let's talk about Fishmas before we get drafted. I mean, we want to get drafted. I got a list of fish, and I'm just gonna win yet another draft. But before we get there, tell me about Fishmas. What is the deal with this?
Yeah, so 2016, I saw a poster from Wisconsin Sea Grant. Thank you, Titus. That basically had a bunch of different Great Lakes fish species on it. And it reminded me a bit of an advent calendar. You know, the ones where you pop up in a door each day in December, you get a piece of candy. But thought to myself, what if instead of candy, each day in December, you got facts about fish? And from that very random, silly idea spawned something that has now come into its 6th year of talking about, you know, the Great Lakes fish, what they are and what they mean to the people of the Great Lakes region.
Fish facts, so much better than candy.
So much better.
It's a clean protein, unlike, well, not every fish you talk about is a clean protein, I suppose. But yeah, no, that's great. And so it really is. It's become like this whole thing in and of itself. And it's an amazing piece of outreach in that it's different, it's fun, it's bite-sized, like a little bite of fish. But it's really, I learn something every day. So I follow you on Twitter, and people join in the Fishmas fun. And, it's super fun to read. And it's the fun part of social media, generally speaking. I mean, you still get the dudes explaining to you things you already know, but it's really fun,
and it really is like the best of communicating with people, because it's not just scientists talking among themselves. We reach people who are just interested in the Great Lakes, kind of that live in the region, people who don't even live in the region are just like, oh, these are cool fish, and the fact that it's grown beyond the Great Lakes has just introduced a lot of people to fish species across the world, which is super cool.
It's a lot of fun. Well, we can't wait to get right into it. And so, Titus, real quick though, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do with Wisconsin Sea Grant?
Well, I am, as a fishery specialist, I do a lot of different stuff, including, spending time on Twitter, 25 Days of Fishmas. I really enjoy, Katie does the work, and then I get to like throw in facts too. So I hope I'm not one of those dudes explaining things. So lots of fun there, but really I ride on commercial fishing boats. I work with a lot of different fishery stakeholders up here in Wisconsin who catch fish out on the Great Lakes. So whether that's recreational, charter, commercial, we've got a lot of fish and a lot of things to work on.
Yeah, that's cool. One of the great things about working at Sea Grant is, we have all these local issues where we're connected to the larger network because there's a Sea Grant program in every coastal and Great Lakes state, basically. And like there are treasures within the Sea Grant program. Like most people we work with are awesome, but some people are treasures. And Titus, you're definitely one of those. And the work you do is just awesome, super fun to follow on social media, super fun to be in groups with and stuff like that. So super pumped. But that's enough of that because now we must turn to the work at hand, which is we are going to draft fish. Great Lakes fish. So this is and so let me run down the rules real quick. We're going to have 3 rounds. I have used a custom R script that I wrote just for this to pick the draft order. A lot of work. I had an intern do it. And anyway, and so we're going to go top to bottom. If you're familiar with drafts, we are not going to go snake style. So whoever picks first in every round. And what we'll do is we'll pick a fish, and once it's taken off the board, no one else can pick it. So if you have anything to chime in, about that fish, the time to do it will be after somebody picks it. And then we will end the podcast, and I will declare myself the winner. So that's pretty much how it's going to go.
It's nice that you're honest that way.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me fire up my random R script. Okay, it just spit out 3 names. I always go last as your gracious host. The first name that I spit out, Carolyn Foley. And so when you go, Carolyn, we know Titus's and Katie's bona fides. So Carolyn, before you go, let us know your fish bona fides, if you don't mind.
So I actually don't think I have fish bona fides. The way I got my job in a fish lab was knowing about aquatic invertebrates, because people care about aquatic invertebrates because fish eat them. So those are my bona fides.
That's good enough for teaching me about the Great Lakes.
I am super excited though, because there is one fish that I absolutely adore, and I figured there was no way I would get to pick it, but because I'm first, lake sturgeon.
Yeah. The obvious, no question, coming off the board first pitch. Tell us about lake sturgeon, Carolyn. Why are they so cool?
They are an amazing, Titus and Katie will know way more than me, so I will defer to them in a moment. But basically, they're an ancient fish. They've been around for a really long time. They are important to the Great Lakes fisheries, to the ecosystem, to the cultures who have surrounded the Great Lakes for long before European settlement. They just look really cool. And I got to help release some in a tributary a couple years ago, and they look just as cool when they're little. My other cool lake sturgeon kind of story is a couple of years ago, I think Titus was there actually. We were at Lake Superior State University, where they have like a hatchery program. And they had Stuart, you may have been there too. And we got to see a lake sturgeon that they were rearing, and like the undergrad students, freshmen if you're in the US, first year students if you're in Canada. The man who ran the facility said, yeah, that fish is older than the students who look after them.
That's
so
right.
That was crazy cool. Okay, Titus and Katie, hit them with the better facts.
I was going to say, Titus, you want to go first? Because I'll just start spitting random stuff out.
Well, I will go Wisconsin specific. So Wisconsin is home to the Lake Winnebago system lake sturgeon population, which is the largest population of lake sturgeon in the world, and really, I'd say the best managed. There is every year, come on up to Lake Winnebago in Wisconsin when February rolls around for our ice fishing, ice spearing season for lake sturgeon. So this is because we have such a large population, because it's been valued as this great sport fishery for years. it's really been well managed. So there are a lot of fish in the system, and it's, continues to be well managed. There's, specific numbers of males and females that can be harvested. If they hit those quotas, season's closed.
How do you tell when you harvest a sturgeon? I mean, are they external, if you know what I'm getting at? What's the deal? How do you, yeah.
Well, in general with sturgeon, the bigger fish are females. So if it's a really big sturgeon, it's probably a female. And once they are harvested, and because it's a spear fishery, you harvest a fish and that's it. There's no catch and release with the spear fishing fishery. So every fish is checked in by a state biologist. They check for the gender. They collect information on all these fish. So, not only is there this fishery, but there's also a lot of data collected every year too. So always fun to go out there, and you get to see the fish when they're checked in. So if you don't mind dead fish.
All right. We're going to put a link in the show notes. Yeah. No, well, I mean, as we talked about before, you have to have a comfort level with dead fish. We talked about rotenone sampling a couple weeks ago. So yeah. Anyway, so are the bigger ones female? Is that just because they grow bigger? Or is it so like snook in, the Gulf of Mexico, they are sequential hermaphrodites. Are sturgeon that way, or is it just the females grow bigger?
Females just grow bigger. Eggs are a bigger investment, so they have just the space, I think, to have that many eggs, because part of the fishery and harvesting these is that caviar. You've heard of sturgeon caviar, beluga caviar over in Russia. Here it's lake sturgeon caviar, and that's something that you can't sell, but you can take it and have it made and then enjoy it with your friends. I got to taste it once because one of the DNR wardens that I knew had harvested a fish, and he had some caviar with him at a Great Lakes Fishery Commission meeting. And so why not? It's a legal fish then.
And I just want to pop in with one lake sturgeon story. As has been said, these guys are large and in charge, particularly the girls. But what was really cool is this past spring 2021, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service caught a sturgeon in the Detroit River that weighed, I believe, 240 pounds. It was funny because the one Fish and Wildlife Service person took a picture like lying next to it, and this was like 7 feet long. And I think the interesting fact that was pointed out there is that fish, well, they didn't age it using otoliths because they released it back into the river. It's possible it could have been 100 years old, and maybe like the comparison that was made is it could be older than the Ambassador Bridge linking Detroit and Windsor. And to me, that just like blew my mind. Like, this is a fish that's that old. So they're super cool. And I'm super jealous that Carolyn picked such an awesome fish.
Yeah. I had a feeling that might go first. I was happy for Carolyn when she got first. That story, actually a Lakey nominee, now that you mention it. FYI, the huge sturgeon. All right. Second up, Katie O'Reilly. Katie, what is your first round pick?
So I'm going to steal Titus's thunder, I think, with this one. But as a wetland ecologist, one of the top predators in Great Lakes coastal wetlands is the illustrious bowfin, which is an awesome sort of what we call a primitive fish. And I think it deserves to be near the top of the draft because it can breathe both in the water and in the air. And Titus has an excellent example right there. I mean, these guys are so cool. They even turn like bright green during the males do during spawning season. I can't talk about how cool enough they are.
And for those of you at home, since this is an audio medium, Titus was holding up, it looked like some sort of large decal or maybe a truck magnet of sturgeon, maybe a poster. It's very lifelike. It is very green. So
actually, if I can plug our Fishopedia, which is available from our Wisconsin Water Library. This is actually a vinyl fish print that comes as in a set. There's some curriculum in there, and we've got some of our great kind of fish all-stars as well.
There you go. You can. Yeah, in fact, we'll put a link to that in the show notes at teachmeaboutthegreatlakes.com/46, the number 46, because this is episode 46. Yeah, bowfin are cool. In Louisiana, they call them shupik, kind of in the Cajun country. Choupique, I think. Not that spelling
There's
is
a lot of vowels. Yeah.
important in Cajun as a language. But yeah, a very cool fish. Carolyn, you're from Canada. Any shupik facts for you?
I don't know if I have any shoe pick facts. My favorite story about them, though, is one time we were fishing with fyke nets, and a beaver had gotten in, and so there was a huge hole. The only fish we caught in like a 48-hour set or whatever was this teeny tiny bowfin that was all rainbow colored. It was gorgeous, and it was, we didn't have to empty out a big net. There were no turtles. It was bad for data collection, but there were some cool things about it. I think that was in a wetland over on Lake Ontario, if I remember right. But yeah.
Excellent. Third up is Titus. Titus, what's up with your fish? Pick number one.
All right. Well, I am going to go with another Great Lakes underdog, and that is going to be the burbot.
No!
Oh, nice job. Nice job.
Okay. And we have our first confirmed sniping. All right. You talk about the burbot while I do some quick research on a different fish. Tell me about the burbot.
All right, burbot. This is the only freshwater member of the cod family. So if you like cod, burbot might be the fish for you. They're also common names, lots of different common names. Eelpoot, if you've heard of the Eelpoot Fest in Minnesota. Here in Wisconsin, you might see lawyers on the menu. And what are those? Those are burbot. Why are they called lawyers? Well, they are slimy and they can really twist around. And I'm not saying that's why, but I'm just pointing out some facts about burbot here.
What do you call 10 burbots in the bottom of Lake Superior?
Not enough lawyers.
A good start. That's the old lawyer joke. My father and wife are attorneys, and I thought I would be an attorney until I met my father and wife, I guess. Yes, burbot, also known as liverfish. It turns out their liver, I just found this out, 6 times the size of like a normal fish. Like that, 6 times as big as you would expect it to be. And then the little line I wrote down that I wanted to make sure I said was, that's so they can drink like a fish, right? With that big liver. But let's see what else. They're supposed to be good. Have you eaten a burbot? Now, there's a lot of way to relate to fish. We focus on eating them because Titus is just a madman. He'll eat anything, fish-wise. But have you had burbot with the firm white flesh that's supposed to be poor man's lobster, according to the article I read on your website, I think?
Oh yes, it is a delicious fish. I've spending time with the commercial fishermen on Lake Michigan. The guys I was working with, they don't catch a lot of burbot. There's not really a market, but they tend to keep them and take them home to eat themselves. So when you're catching fish for a living and this is a fish you want to eat, that's a good sign. The kind of loins, the back muscle along the spine, there's kind of taking those out. They're boneless. Cut them into little kind of discs. You can deep fry them. There's on the Freshwater Feasts of Michigan Sea Grant's website. Check out my recipe for deep fried burbot. It's a good way to eat them. But if you want to go basic, you cut them into little medallions. You boil them. Just like you're cooking a lobster, you got a little dish of melted butter. You got your boiled burbot. Dip it in there, you eat it. It's delicious. And that is why a lot of people don't know this, but the lobster is actually referred to as the poor man's burbot. So
there we go. That's right. Tulane University, where I went, was Harvard is known as the Tulane of the North. That's what we used to say there. Good. Now there's one more burbot fact that must come out. And maybe you know this. And this is some research that came out in the Journal of Great Lakes Research in 2014, which definitely would have won the Lakey had there been Lakeys then. They sing during spawning. So they gather in the winter and they spawn on the bottom of the lake or whatever, and they make this drumming sound. And it sounds like a fish spawning, not going to lie, and it's got like a certain rhythm to it. I'm not going to play it because this is a family podcast, and once you've heard it, there's no mistaking what's happening. But the male burbots sing during spawning, so that's something that we share in common, I suppose.
And actually, that sound is they actually vibrate muscles on their swim bladders to create that sound, which is pretty cool. It's like having a musical instrument in your body.
And that brings me to my first round pick. This was one of my backups. And this is one because, the shtick on this is I'm from the Gulf South. And it's true. And I grew up fishing, several times, once or twice a month, at least with my dad in the Gulf. And we would go fishing for fish in the Cyanidae family, or cyanids, most notably the sea trout, or we call them speckled trout, and the redfish, is what we call them, red drum. They are drums, and in the Great Lakes, you can also find a freshwater drum. which is common there. And they're, this is not a rare fish. It's not even that interesting other than it is the only cyanid that is in the Great Lakes. And so it is meaningful to me, or in freshwater, I think, for that matter. And so it's important to me because those are the fish I grew up for. And a big chunk of why I do what I do is because of all those fishing trips. And so to know that, there is a cyanid nearby, I think is good and important. And so it gives me just a little bit of warmth in my heart. And a lot of the cyanids, they're the drum family. A lot of them will make drumming noises too. Not going to lie, I don't know if freshwater drum do. Trout do it rarely, redfish some. The black drum, and you can get feet long. You can hear them drumming during their spawning time in the South, and that's notable. So freshwater drum.
I'm going to take umbrage. I think they are super interesting, Stuart. So one of the things that's really interesting about freshwater drum is, yes, they do make sounds. And two, they have these like huge otoliths. So otoliths are the ear bones of fish. And we use them a lot in fishery scientists to like age how old the fish is, because it's kind of like tree rings. You can count the rings. But these guys, and so most otoliths are pretty small, but like freshwater drums have otoliths that are, no lie, the size of quarters. And they're actually called lucky stones. And people collect them on Great Lakes beaches. So like they'll go, we don't have a ton of shells other than like quagga and mussel or zebra mussel shells, but people go collect lucky stones off the beaches.
Really? I had no idea. Are they easier to cut then? So yeah, I used to do marine fisheries biology. We had to cut otoliths from fish bones, and I sucked at it. I rapidly got moved off that duty and onto answering the phone. But are they easier to cut because they're bigger or not? So you have to like cross section them or something, and yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I've not done much aging of their otoliths. Usually we take them out and just admire them. I don't know, Titus, have you done any freshwater drum aging?
I have not, but I know they can get pretty old as fish. And
yeah.
Interesting.
Sheepshead. Sheepshead is the other common name that we...
Really? So that's a different fish. I'm thinking of the saltwater fish called a sheepshead. So this is different. Interesting.
And also a card game, regional card game up here too.
A regional card game.
Yeah.
Look at this. Just a well of... You know what? Actually, what the heck? Hold on one second. No, I won't do it. Yes, I will. It's a Great Lakes factoid. A Great Lakes factoid. It's a great factoid about the Great Lakes. Today's Great Lakes factoid is there is a regional card game called Sheepshead, which is also one of the many names for the freshwater drum, a fish that is fascinating because of the size of its otoliths. All right, great. That is round one in the books. Let me make sure I write down all the picks. We have sturgeon. We had bowfin. We had Titus taking burbot before I could, but then me coming back with the fascinating freshwater drum. Round two. Carolyn, what you got?
I'm going to pick round gobies.
Round gobies. Okay.
I know they can be considered a Grinch because they are an invasive species. There is another sticker. Nice. But they are also becoming an increasingly important member of the Great Lakes food webs. They are a source of food for a whole bunch of fish that people care about. And they are not as cool as any of the fish we picked in the first round, but they do have some cool ecology. So, yep, that's my pick.
Round gobies. Excellent. And they're nice and tubular shaped too, right?
Oh, shoot, I shouldn't have picked round gobies because now you're going to talk about goby dogs.
That is true. So here's my thought. While you're thinking of your interesting goby facts, it's an invasive species, and we want to control these, right? And so I'm thinking, first of all, let me posit two things. One, invasive species, right? And the second thing I will stipulate is two, that's huge to eat gobies in Eastern Europe, which we learned from IAGLR Lifetime Achievement Award winner Hank Vanderploeg. So here's what I'm thinking. And with three, stipulate third thing, Chicago, famous for hot dogs, right? It's just what they have hot dog stands. There's like a special style. You get your pickle and your celery salt, and what have you. So I'm thinking goby dogs, right? They're the right shape. You just pluck them, pop them down. I mean, you got to boil them or whatever and hand them out. What are we thinking?
4, they don't have a swim bladder. They are obligate benthivores, so they're really close to a bunch of the contaminants that are at the bottom of the Great Lakes. So
flavorful is what I'm hearing.
I was going to say, adds a little spice.
Yeah, so they're bony and flavorful. But anyway, so this is my big idea with round gobies. Maybe this will be the first invasive species that we actually eat out of existence once my business takes off. Anyway, gobies, what do y'all think?
one of the first stories that comes to mind for me with gobies kind of builds off Carolyn, in that round gobies are in part credited for helping bring back the endangered Lake Erie water snake because it became a major prey item for them. And this was a species that was, really struggling in numbers, but with the advent of, this huge food source, which in some cases is bad because, invasive species, it also helped benefit a native endangered species.
One of the things I love about gobies is just that when you are trying to identify fish, you got to look at fins, you got to count things like scales. And when you flip that goby over, that pelvic fin is fused. And that is not something that we see in our native fish. So for us in the Great Lakes, it's either the round goby or the tube-nosed goby.
Nice. Easy fish idea is always good. Rats, I forgot. So the one thing is, with the round gobies, if we take those and we have your goby dogs or whatever, we can also take the freshwater drum, right, and fry those up, serve them on the side. A little bit of freshwater drumsticks to go with it. So that'll be good. Not that good joke. Copyright 2021 Hope Charters, Illinois Indiana Sea Grant Communication Coordinator. Great. Pick number 2. We are going to Katie O'Reilly. Your second pick.
Ooh, second pick, I'm going to have to go with the silver lamprey, which, despite its name, is not the introduced sea lamprey that everybody kind of knows about and, rightly understands how the bad impacts it's had. The silver lamprey is a native lamprey species that has kind of evolved in tandem with the native species, so it doesn't have the really bad effects of like killing tons of fish species. And they're just really cute little guys. I mean, they're like, maybe about anywhere from 6 inches to a foot, depending on the size you get. But they're just little guys just living their lives on the sides of fish.
So are these like the same size as the sea lamprey? Are they smaller? And so they don't go and latch onto fish?
Yeah, these are definitely smaller than the sea lamprey. The sea lamprey can get, I think, to about 2 feet. Don't quote me on that exactly. But in general, the sea lamprey are a lot larger than our native species.
Yeah, and if you think, a sea lamprey is out in the ocean, it's attaching to like sharks and really big fish. And, I have seen silver lamprey attached to sturgeon, and sturgeon are our biggest fish, but, that's as big as they get.
Awesome. Silver lamprey. Excellent. I'd never heard of it. So I'm learning along with the listener. Excellent. Titus, pick number 2.
All right, second fish. I should have been thinking about this more. Yeah, I think I'm going to just go like professionally, like what fish have I spent the most time with in the last couple of years? And that's the lake whitefish, princess of the Great Lakes, the deer of the Great Lakes, a fish that you could eat every day and never get tired of. So actually, if you look at my picks so far, it's all stuff that I've eaten. And so lake whitefish, it's our kind of commercially caught fish species, most commercially caught in the upper Great Lakes, so Huron, Michigan, and Superior. It is in the trout and salmon family. The whitefish are kind of cousins. So if you're trying to identify it, look for that adipose fin, that little nub of a fin between the dorsal fin and the caudal fin. And that's a good indicator that you're looking at a whitefish or a trout or salmon.
They're also pretty important culturally. Historically, there's some people are trying to restore some populations now, right? Like doing some research on early life stages to understand kind of where they've run into issues. So good pick, Titus.
Wait, what is that? What was that? I missed it. Titus fish are sailing by my screen.
That is my lake whitefish.
I didn't realize they had such a humpback like that. How about that?
Yeah, so historically they would have, these 50 or 100 years ago they got a lot bigger. And I could, if you want to hear about what's happened to lake whitefish, we could talk about that for hours. But generally you don't see that as much anymore. But there used to be very, very large lake whitefish out there.
Interesting. So for my my second round pick, I'm going to choose it's also another invasive that and the reason I'm picking it is because I think it tells a really interesting story about the Great Lakes and sort of the trade-offs in different management and choices that we can make. And so I'm choosing the alewife. which was introduced sometime in the 19th century. As far as I can tell, they're not exactly sure when. Titus is holding up a little tiny alewife. They were introduced in Lake Ontario, we think, and then they invaded in the early part of the 20th century. And just like went everywhere, because the lake trout had collapsed, and so there were no predators, right, to predate on the alewives, and so the numbers just exploded. The numbers were so big that like they would fill in like power plants would have to shut down because the alewives were like up in their water intake valves or whatever. I don't know the right terminology. But the thing is that alewives, so they were just this huge nuisance, right? Because there were just so many alewives, and sometimes they would even like die off in huge amounts and like stink up beaches and what have you. And this is described really nicely in Death and Life of the Great Lakes. And so this led, maybe directly, maybe indirectly, to the introduction. Some people would say introduction. Some people would say introduce, which you can find at Wisconsin Sea Grant. And but anyway, they introduced salmon, right? To eat the alewives, kind of like the old lady who swallowed the fly. And that wasn't, I don't think, the only reason he introduced the salmon. In fact, if you ask Howard Tanner, who did it, he says he introduced salmon to create a fishery. And then alewives went from fish that was a big problem to fish that was really important because it was supporting this very valuable and very fun fishery. So the alewife is a fascinating fish when it comes to human Great Lake interactions.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I would not have liked to been on the beach during the height of the alewife season, because you can see some historical pictures back from the 60s and early 70s where there's just like piles of dead alewife on Chicago beaches. And I can only imagine how much that must have reeked. But yeah, the good thing there's no smell-o-vision in those pictures.
Yeah, I know. I hear from, people who live in Manitowoc and remember those days. Like they knew when the wind shifted in the afternoon to the lake breeze because the reek of rotting alewives would suddenly be the smell they were getting off Lake Michigan. So yeah, peak alewife numbers for Lake Michigan, about 90% of all the fish biomass was alewives. So
what?
9 out of 10 pounds were alewives.
And they're not a huge fish, right?
Yeah, they're small.
No, that's the smallest vinyl cling thing you've flown by our screen by far, I think. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of alewife. Jeez.
And there was also a commercial fishery, so salmon were stocked for those to eat them and to create a fishery, but also there were a commercial harvest, and for Lake Michigan it was 50 million pounds in some years were harvested commercially, really low value, like 1 to 2 cents a pound, mainly going to pet food. But people found uses for them. And then as numbers have come down, now we actually, our discussions are like, hey, we need to protect our alewives because they're the food for the salmon, and salmon are a fish we value. So it's kind of we've been on both ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so interesting. It's just for that reason. And without commenting on what I think is right, it's just it's trade-offs are right there, right? It is the fulcrum on which the trade-offs swing. And so I think that's interesting. Okay, great. 2 rounds in the books. Woo! We're getting there. Carolyn Foley, what is your third and final pick?
I came into this saying I didn't have fish cred. I know it's a fish draft, but I'm going to draft an extraordinarily important fish food, which are Hexagenia mayflies specifically from the western basin of Lake Erie, but from other parts of the Great Lakes too. They are super cool. They are big and important caloric intake for things. They are also kind of terrifying looking. Like they have these long tails and crazy legs and feathery things. They are also relatively easy to identify, and they are just plain awesome. That's when they're in the water. And then everybody knows what they do when they come onto shore. They cover everything. People have to sweep them into the lakes, and everyone else is like, those are gross. And Carolyn's like, yes. All right.
There we go. The Hexagenia mayflies, and I'm looking in the rule book. You know what? You just send it to me in an email, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Sounds good.
And I'm looking through the rule book here, and there's no.
I was going to say, can I call a foul on this? We're throwing a yellow flag in.
There's no rule you can't draft a mayfly during the fish draft, I guess.
I was going to say, what is your real pick now?
Yeah, right.
I mean, Hexagenia are great, but
striped bass. I'm going striped bass because I'm going for the climate change angle, that if lakes change and things like that, they may be a fish that the Great Lakes could support in the future.
There we go. looking forward with the Carolyn always here for your climate change good news. Thank you for that. Great. I honestly forgot who's second. Katie, second pick.
Second pick or third pick, I guess at this point.
Or third pick. Second pick, third round, third pick. Don't go back and make the same pick. We already got it. Silver lamprey. Yeah.
Gonna have to end on a Great Lakes fish, and that is the long-nosed gar. So I already repped one wetland predator, repping another one. Long-nosed gar are really cool because they, one, have just like an awesome set of chompers. You were talking about like a fish that's mostly its nose and mouth. But they also can breathe in water and air, which allows them to live in places that are really tough for other fish to live, like some of these wetlands. And they've got like this armor instead of like their scales are essentially like a suit of armor. And so they're just like a ancient looking prehistoric fish that just likes to hang out in the water and, every now and then snap and get, a nice fish to snack on. So long-nosed gar.
Anybody have factoid on the one factoid I have is I know when I used to try, I would try to go fly fishing before it turns out that I have no coordination and cannot fly fish. But I read about how to do fly fishing, and some people for gar, they will use like yarn instead of and no hook to try to get tangled up in the, and I quote, excellent set of chompers that they have. So I can't confirm that that's ever actually happened, but I read about it on the internet in like the early 2000s, so it's probably true. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to note that we've picked a lot of really cool shaped fish with different evolutionary dynamics, like gar looked like a torpedo. But now I'll let Titus talk about something more interesting.
Well, this is a childhood memory of growing up in northwestern Wisconsin. One summer we had, for whatever reason, in front of our neighbor's dock, the long-nosed gar were spawning there, and they would just jump out of the water. So imagine, kind of that sailfish, porpoise breaching kind of thing. And they just did this for like a couple of weeks, and it was really, you go down to the dock, they'd just be swimming along, jumping out of the water. I've never seen it again. Just 1 year. I think it really happened. I don't know. It was really cool.
That is excellent. All right, well, take us to your third and final pick here, Titus.
All right, I'm gonna go wetland species. I was going to go juvenile yellow perch just because they're kind of a wetland all-star, but I'm actually going to go a little different. I'm going to say central mud minnow because it's one of my favorites. Actually, it's very small, not actually a minnow. So we're not talking like a shiner or a fathead minnow. They're actually more closely related to the northern pike and the muskellunge than to other fish species. Even though they're just a few inches long, you can look for that distinctive kind of dorsal fin really far back on their body, which we would actually see with the long-nosed gar as well. They've got that dorsal fin way in back because they're like little kind of, for central mud minnow, they're torpedoes eating plankton, but long-nosed gar are like torpedoes eating fish. So small, not something you'd necessarily see a lot or know about, but I think they're pretty cool looking fish and something that I've seen a lot in wetlands over the years.
I don't have a lot on central mud minnow, but it sounds really cool, so that's good.
I'll just toss in that their scientific name essentially translates to like mud shadow or mud phantom, which I just find is like super metal. That would be a great band name.
That would be. I was thinking about that with the walleye, which nobody picked, but their genus name is kind of lame, sand or whatever. But their specific name of Vitreous is like, much cooler. Greek god of aquaculture, whatever. Cool. Great. Well, then for my final pick, we're going to bring it home. So I need to explain this a little bit before I actually make the pick. And that is that lately I've been trying to not pigeonhole myself in like, one way of thinking, right? In that I feel like I've had this tunnel vision and I hadn't really opened my mind to all of the possibilities out there, just generally speaking, until I was riding through campus about a week or two ago. And I saw a dude holding up a flag that said, "Birds aren't real." And I said, well, and so I saluted him. And then he kept talking, which was weird. I was like, oh, I thought, and like he had pamphlets, so I just kept writing. And then I went. Carolyn said, "This is a rabbit hole," and I've gone down the rabbit hole. And without commenting on whether or not birds are real, what it's done is it's really opened to my mind to what is real, the Matrix, right? Or am I being too simple-minded? And all of this is to say I'm picking the bull shark. And the reason I'm picking the bull shark is because there are unconfirmed reports that in the 1950s, somebody caught a bull shark in Lake Michigan. And I always dismiss this for a number of reasons. Like the bull shark could not really get here. If it were to get here, it probably would not survive. There's not. And anyway, all of this, they have been found as far north as Alton, Illinois. But I am picking the bull shark because I've been too narrow-minded in what is possible. And I think just because a fish has never been seen here and couldn't make it here and probably wouldn't survive doesn't mean that I should close off the way that my mind works. So the final pick is the bull shark.
You're sure you don't want to pick walleye?
Walleye is also a fish. It's on my list. No, I'm looking. I wrote it down as bull shark. Katie, how many bull sharks are there in Lake Michigan?
To my knowledge, again, this depends like how we're defining reality. Like it could be Schrodinger's bull shark. It both exists in Lake Michigan and does not. I guess I go on the does not side of things.
Does not.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, that's you're thinking of kind of the classic rational.
But again, maybe my brain hasn't expanded enough.
Just read about birds for enough time.
No, thank you.
Open your mind.
No,
maybe you lick a goby, and open your mind. Titus, you look disgusted with my pick.
I am disgusted. If you wanted a really out there pick that's actually real, you could have gone with flounders, because there are actually some flounders that have showed up in the Great Lakes.
No.
Ballast water.
They can't reproduce, but they can kind of survive.
I had no idea. No kidding. So they're ballast water escapees. I mean, for the flounders, start off real small. So for those who know flounders, they're a flatfish. They actually swim like upright while they're young, and then as an adult, they settle down on the bottom, and their eyes migrate to the top of their head. At least the ones that I'm familiar with. And so then they're really tasty but creepy because they're all white on the bottom and dark on the top. But they can get huge. In the Gulf, we would catch what we call doormat size flounder, just ridiculously big. I had no idea. All right, you know what? My pick is amended. I pick the flounder, which is an out there pick. And I encourage you to think about the bull shark yourself, though. Great. Well, this has been clearly, Carolyn is also, I'm sorry. I had to pick the bull shark. There was no choice. But I've been duly shamed.
There were many choices. Let's talk about some of the other choices we could have made.
At least other choices. Great Lakes.
All right. Well, in that nature, we will do we'll not a lightning round, but we'll run through, name 2 or 3 other fish that was on your list. We'll go in order. Carolyn. Oh, right. Like you have room to complain, Madam Mayfly. What else was on your list?
So in addition to juvenile yellow perch that Titus mentioned and walleye that you mentioned and then dismissed, I was considering if everyone else had picked salmon, I was going to pick sea lamprey so that my sea lamprey could take out all of your salmon. And I'll credit Zach Feiner at Wisconsin for giving me that idea.
Oh, so you brought in ringers too, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I spoke with our AIS specialists and with our director, who's a fish ecologist. And he got me turned on to the burbot. Titus, Katie was next. What else is on your list, Katie?
Many. I also had yellow perch, so that seems like that was a common theme. I would say though, my 2 that I would definitely draft into my team are the American eel, which can make it into like inland into the Great Lakes. It's definitely in Lake Ontario, but they're just super cool. And I could talk about eels all day. But then also the pirate perch, which is notable for having its anus or cloaca on its throat instead of, the normal place that a fish would have one.
Why is its anus? What is like? So it eats? Does it eat out of its mouth, or does it eat out of its? Is it just I know its mouth is in his butt, and so it's backward. Like what is? Well,
and it's interesting too because when they're first hatch, it's similar to the flounder that their anus starts in the normal place, but then it migrates up to their throat as they get older. I'm not sure of the evolutionary significance of that. Maybe Titus, you are. But yeah, they do have a separate mouth too, so it's not like they're eating out of the same hole.
Right.
But it's interesting. Their species name is actually Sayanus. It's Sayanus. It's an easy one to remember.
Sayanus one more time.
Sorry, this is a family show.
No, I mean only barely. No, it is. Actually, Carolyn won't let me.
It's not you, Katie. Yeah. It's not you.
Okay. Do they speak English in anus? All right, Titus, what else What else was on your list?
My list. I came in thinking there would be like fish to pick from, so I didn't have a list. I didn't know what we were doing.
I could have sent more emails, I suppose, but I just rely on your good nature and skill. Yeah.
I can talk about fish, so that's kind of what I do. I'd say, white suckers, kind of another underrated fish species that are definitely important in the ecology of the lakes, but also a really fun species because you can actually, see them spawning in the spring. They're one of the first fish species to start moving upstream, and you can actually, see them. They really don't care that you're there when they're busy with their spawning activities. And, I think any opportunity just to get people, give people the chance to go down to just your local waterway and see fish doing stuff is pretty cool. Lots of people, get into fish because they're anglers, and, that's great. But I prefer to buy my fish usually and just to look at fish. So, suckers are great. Let's go with a final food fish too. I'm going to go with the bloater, which is another sort of cousin to the whitefish. It's also in the Coregonus genus. And if you've ever had smoked chubs, that is a kind of historically a popular Great Lakes commercially harvested fish. They're small, smoke them up, skin on, and you just kind of peel the skin back, and then you eat them like a corn cob, a smoked, oily fish corn cob. It's delicious. So keep an eye out for those.
And I do have to throw in one fact about that though, because there is a restaurant, I believe in Michigan, that serves a Chubby Mary, which has a smoked chub in a Bloody Mary, and that's like their claim to fame. So
yeah, so if you're in Leland, Michigan, you're visiting Fishtown for their great historical commercial fishing information, but while you're there, get yourself a Chubby Mary. I've never had one, but it looks good. I mean, why wouldn't you have one?
I mean, for those who don't have their anus in their throat, you can bring the taste of that directly through the Chubby Mary. Carolyn, you got a factoid too.
I didn't have a factoid so much. I was just going to mention that we can even make white suckers a food fish, because I was talking to someone at a grocery store in Michigan one day, someone who worked behind the fish counter, and said they would catch white suckers, they would blend them up, can them, and use them in place of salmon. So there's a lot of cool stuff available.
Yeah, you can. You drop a net down. It's like a net that sits on the bottom of the creek. You're at a bridge crossing. Suckers swim in there. You lift it up. You fill up your buckets with suckers, and then you pickle them. They're good pickled. I've had them that way.
Well, this has actually been a really fascinating conversation. But that's actually not the reason why we invited you on Teach Me About the Great Lakes this week. The reason that we invited you to Teach Me About the Great Lakes is to ask two questions, actually, one of which I prepped you for. And the first of the two questions is this, and we'll start with you, Katie. If you could choose to have a great donut for breakfast or a great sandwich for lunch, but not both, which would you choose?
Oh, I'm going to have to go with the sandwich. I just feel like there's so much more variety you could get there.
All right, so variety. I'm going to go and visit the Department of Biological Sciences, and I assume they have a Fishman's Museum in your department, or if they don't, they will one day. And I'm going to go visit this museum, and I will get hungry. And so I will stop for my first sandwich at Tom Coombs' house, where he will make me a BLT from his garden. But that's not enough. A BLT is not a very filling sandwich. I need a second sandwich. Katie, where shall I go in South Bend, Indiana, to get a second sandwich?
It's been a while since I've been there, but there is a restaurant called The Evil Check, and they have hamburgers, which I'm going to assume is a sandwich. We're not going to get into that philosophical debate, but it's actually they put a layer of peanut butter on it. And while that sounds super, super gross, it actually works. I don't know why, but it does.
There we go. That's famous in West Lafayette. They have this XXX diner, and they sell a peanut. I mean, come on, I'm not stupid. I've never had one, but they do sell it. Great. Well, I will go get the Evil Check, or I will go to Evil Check and get the peanut butter burger.
If they still have it.
I might just get a second BLT. Yeah. All right. No, there it is. All right, Titus, sandwich or donut?
I love donuts, but I'm going to go sandwich too.
All right. And so when I am in, you're in Manitowoc, if I remember correctly, which is home of the Wisconsin Maritime Museum. Yes. And so when I go to visit I spend the night on the boat. I wake up, I have a great donut from the place that the nice woman recommended to us, and then I want to go to lunch. Where should I go to get a sandwich?
All right, you're going to walk out of that Maritime Museum. You're going to go up to York Street, and you're going to take a left, and you're going to go to Ryan's on York, and you're going to get yourself a Cuban pork sandwich.
There we go. I'll be reminiscent of my time in the Tampa Bay area. I will do it. And we'll put links to both of those in the show notes. And so the second question is this. One of our goals with this show is to try to help people realize what a special resource the Great Lakes is. Great Lakes are the Great Lakes. And so, you know, and one way to do that is to share kind of special places, I think. And so is there a special place in the Great Lakes that you would like to share with our audience? It could be like a secret place. It can be a really beautiful place, just a place you've had fun, some place that's special to you and why. And Katie, we'll start with you on that one.
Oh, there's several that come to mind, but if I had to pick just one, I would say the Lachino Islands, which are on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, kind of just due east of the Mackinac Bridge. And it's just an area that is so filled with like wetlands and different habitats. And so there's just such an amazing diversity. And the fact it's almost like, you know, all these little islands that are all separated from each other, and a really just cool place to chill for the summer.
Very cool. Lachino Islands on the UP. Headed there. The second glove, as Carolyn calls it. Great. Titus, how about you?
All right. I would invite people to visit Rock Island, which is you go to the end of Door County, you take a ferry to Washington Island, you drive across Washington Island, you get on a second smaller ferry, and you go to Rock Island. It is the entire island's a state park. There are no vehicles there. You need to just take all your stuff with you and spend a week there. You're out at the right in Lake Michigan. It's an amazing spot.
That is amazing. Anytime you got to take a second ferry, that's the key. Is that second ferry? Like one ferry is good, two ferries. Excellent. Katie, if people want to find out more about Fishmas or the work that you do, where can they go and find that information?
Yeah, so they can check out my Twitter page, which is at the handle at Dr. Catfish, and that's catfish with a K, and the doctor is hopefully soon.
Very soon. Although really, it's just a degree. Like you're a doctor in spirit, soon to be in name. And Titus, if people want to find out more about the work that you do, where can they go?
Look me up at Wisconsin Sea Grant, but on Twitter, I am at Dr. Fish SG. SG
for Sea Grant, I assume.
Or super great.
Or super great. Excellent. Well, Katie O'Reilly, doctoral candidate, the Department of Biological Sciences at Notre Dame University, and Titus Seilheimer, fisheries specialist at Wisconsin Sea Grant. Thanks so much to both of you for coming on and teaching us all about the Great Lakes. Well, another draft in the books, Carolyn, and I'll be honest, I'm pretty sure I won again.
Well, I don't think that you won, but it doesn't really matter what I think. That was a really fun draft, though. That was a good time. It's a nice way to end the year.
Yep, good people. I agree. And so then a little bit of business. Lakey nominations are closed, but tune in. The next episode after this one will be the Lakeys. And Lord willing and the creek don't rise. That'll happen in December, but sometimes the creek does rise. So we will see. But if not, it'll be in January because we're kicking it during our winter holiday. But, stay tuned to the feed and, of course, Twitter and what have you. And we'll let you know when it's out there. All right, take it away, Carolyn.
Teach Me About the Great Lakes is brought to you by the fine people at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. We encourage you to check out the great work we do at iiseagrant.org and at ILIN Grant on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. Teach Me About the Great Lakes is produced by Hope Charters, who did not make that joke, I bet, Carolyn Foley, Megan Gunn, and Irene Miles. Ethan Chitty is our associate producer and fixer. Our super fun podcast artwork is by Joel Davenport. The show is edited by the awesome Quinn Rose, and I encourage you to check her work out at aspiringrobot.com. If you have have a question or comment about the show, please email it to teachmeaboutthegreatlakes@gmail.com or leave a message on our hotline at 765-496-IISG. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Teach Great Lakes. Thanks for listening. Hope you all have a nice holiday season and keep grading those lakes.